I've lived long enough to know that memories grow heavy with time, some get softer around the edges, others grow sharper than a knife. What happened on that ridge back in '76 is a bit of both for me. Even now, after all these years, I can close my eyes and taste the dust, feel the heat like a hand on my neck, and hear the crack of rifles echoing against the bare hills. They say the past is never really gone. It lingers in a man's bones, even when his hair's turned white and his step has slowed. And when it comes to that day on the banks of the Little Bighorn, well, that memory has never let me be. The funny thing about soldiers is, fear can make cowards of the best of us, even the stout-hearted who've seen fighting before. I remember Dan Neely, folks called him Crackerbox Dan afterward because, in the middle of the fight, he crouched behind a cracker box, hoping the wood would stop a bullet. Captain Moreland, who got nicknamed Appareo Mickey, lay low behind an old Appareo pack pad, trying to stay alive. And young Billy Blake, poor lad, feigned a wound and lay among the real wounded for 2 days to keep from facing the guns. He wasn't hurt a bit. Now, you might think less of them. But they were brave enough on other days. Good men, each of them. Trouble is, what happened earlier that day rattled us all. Major Reno lost his nerve and led a frantic retreat uphill, shouting orders nobody could make out over the gunfire. And that fear spread like prairie fire. Even the strongest horse can bolt when the smell of smoke hits its nose. As for me, I spent the day dragging the bodies of dead horses to make breastworks, sweating in the sun, powder burning my eyes as I fired back at the Sioux and Cheyenne. And all the while, a single question thudded in my chest like a drum: where's the general? Custer had never been the kind to leave his men in a pinch. He could be brash, reckless even, but abandoning us? That wasn't his way. Some said maybe he'd gone around to join General Terry, but I knew better. And so did most of the boys. Alongside the thirst that cracked our tongues and the heat that burned our necks, it was that worry, where Custer had gone, that gnawed at us hardest. Early that afternoon, we saw smoke and dust rising from a ridge not far off. A good number of Indians peeled away from us and headed in that direction. We figured maybe Custer had found them and was giving them what for. Then came a volley of shots from that ridge. After a pause, another volley. Some of us laughed nervously, guessing the general was pushing them hard. Only later did it strike us that those shots might have been Custer calling us for help. His last hope that we'd break out and come to his aid. But we stayed behind our rifle pits, our backs pressed to the earth, waiting for orders that never came. And before long, the shooting from that direction stopped. The smoke drifted off, and the dust settled. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. It's hard to tell the story in the order it happened, because even then it felt like everything blurred together: the shouting, the gunfire, the heat shimmering off the rocks, the cries of the wounded begging for water. The river flowed below us, cool, clear, and so close we could see the sunlight dancing on it. But between us and that salvation lay open ground swept by enemy fire. There was a ravine we could crawl partway down, but the last stretch to the water meant stepping into a hail of bullets. Dr. Porter, God bless him, worked himself half to death tending to the wounded. He sawed off limbs when he had to, stitched wounds as best he could, and never flinched. "My wounded need water," he told us. "Who'll risk it?" Some of the boys stepped forward without hesitation, crawling through the draw with buckets and canteens clanging at their belts. I went with them at first, but when my horse caught a bullet in the flank, I pulled back. Maybe it was cowardice, maybe just common sense, but I chose to live through thirst rather than die in the open. Some made it to the river, some didn't. I watched a fellow get shot just as he stooped to fill a pail. The bucket flew from his hands, and his leg shattered under him. Another man dragged him back by a stirrup, his leg hanging useless. In time, that leg was cut off to save his life. The water they brought back was barely enough to wet the lips of the worst off. But it was something. And over the hours, more men tried, each time risking death for a few swallows. I remember seeing Dandy, the general's little brown horse, go down with a bullet to the neck. He'd been with Custer since '68, always straining to stay at the head of the column. As he lay dying, he let out a soft nicker. His eyes turned to me, and I could almost feel him asking why I wasn't there to help him like before. My throat clenched tight. I thought of how Custer would feel when he heard Dandy was gone. Then I remembered the general had spoken of getting a new horse before we'd left Fort Lincoln. Dandy had been getting up in years. Looking into that horse's gentle eyes as he bled out was almost too much. It felt like watching the last piece of the old days die with him. The day dragged on, hot as a forge. Each hour felt like 10. We kept expecting the Indians to rush us from behind, where the hill gave little cover. But they didn't. As the sun dropped, the shooting slowed, and the dust of battle drifted away. The Indians began to slip off toward their village, mourning their dead and resting their ponies. We hadn't eaten since morning. We chewed on hardtack and raw bacon, but without water, it was like swallowing gravel. Some men dropped to the ground and slept where they fell, too tired to care if death came in the night. I was posted to guard duty outside Major Reno's tent. Inside, he was drinking, maybe to steady his nerves, maybe to drown them. At one point, I heard him say to another officer, "I wonder where the Murat of the American Army is by now." They both laughed. I didn't know then who Murat was, but I caught the bitterness behind the words, and it turned my stomach. Night settled over us. The valley, once alive with gunfire and smoke, lay quiet under the stars. Now and then, from far off, came the sound of Indian drums and the mourning wails of women for their fallen. I'd stop my pacing and strain my ears, hoping to catch the clink of tack or a low voice, anything that might mean Custer and his men were making their way back to us. But the darkness stayed silent. All night, I kept looking toward the ridge where we'd last seen the smoke, hoping, praying. But morning came, and nothing had changed. Through the day and night, one Indian sniper kept us pinned down worse than the rest. Hidden behind rocks, armed with a long-range buffalo gun, he picked us off one by one. We couldn't see him, but we sure felt him every time he fired. Toward the end, Captain Ryan managed to get him with a shot of his own. After the fight, I went over and saw the Indian lying still, the heavy gun beside him and a wall of stones he'd built for cover. A single man, hidden and patient, had done more to sap our strength than a whole company charging us head-on. Thinking back now, it seems like it lasted forever. The thirst, the waiting, the terror of what might come over the ridge, and the deeper fear of what had already happened there. I tried to hold on to hope, that maybe the general had broken through somewhere, that he'd circle back. But hope is a fragile thing. Sometimes I think it would have been easier to die on that hill, among friends, rather than carry the memory of it through the years. The mind plays tricks. Part of me half believes I'll wake up and find myself young again, back with the 7th, brushing down the horses, hearing the general's laugh carry across the camp. But the years have made it clear, there's no waking from this memory. People still argue about what happened. Some put the blame on Reno, calling him a coward. Others see Custer as the hero who fell with his men. Truth be told, none of us that day knew the full story. We only saw our corner of the fight. Looking back now, I know Custer made mistakes, splitting the command, underestimating the enemy, thinking the Sioux would scatter at the first show of force. And Reno? Maybe he faltered, but he faced a tide that few men could have turned. At the end of the day, we were outnumbered, outplanned, and fighting men who had more to lose than we did. They were defending their homes, their families, the ground itself. No court of inquiry or history book can change the truth we lived. We were beaten by men who knew what they were fighting for. Time has thinned our ranks. Many of those I stood beside that day are gone now, their names carved in stone. The arguments over who was to blame echo less and less with each passing year. What lingers instead is the memory of the men, their courage, their fear, their humanity. Even now, as an old man, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the sun on my face that day, see the haze of gun smoke hanging over the ridge, and hear, faintly, the last shots fired by Custer's men. That sound never really left me. History can debate strategies and condemn choices, but only those of us who were there can speak of the thirst that cut our throats, the fear that stiffened our spines, and the sorrow that came when silence finally fell. And in the quiet moments, when the world around me fades, I still look toward that distant ridge, straining for a sign of the man we waited for, a man who never came.